Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the International Press Center, Residence Palace here. Maria Nikolova from our Communications and Publications Department always finds these nicely symbolic venues. I guess this one needed to be at the heart of EU decision-making for this important topic. So thank you, Maria, for bringing us here. We're going to be discussing the future of the green transition and much more, as far as I've understood from the program and the publication that I had the opportunity to at least have a look at. We'll have a very broad picture today, and I hope also time to really dive deep. I'll be very brief in the introduction because I have the pleasure today. It's really great for me. So my colleague Neva from WSI will take over in about 3 minutes, and then I'll just sit in the room and sit back and relax, and that's nice for a change. But of course, not before reminding all of us that the ETUI European Trade Union Institute, where I'm director of research, by the way, has a long tradition in conducting research on just transition, organizing many events also on the topic. Hence why we again have a nice full room here today. And at the same time, today is going to be a little bit different, not only because we're in the Residence Palace, but also because, first of all, well, we are co-organizing this event. I'm very happy about that. With the Institute of Economic and Social Research, WSI in Germany. And of course, WSI is linked to the Hans Buckler Foundation, HBS. So I'm very happy, Bettina, to have you here with us today, my counterpart from WSI. We're also going to look at just transition from a little bit of a different angle than we are used to. And I think that that's extremely enriching. And so I'm super happy, Ulrich, to have you also here with us today. Co-author of that book that that you will have a look at, or that you've already had a look at, on Capitalism at the Limit. And I think that this is really an important book, and that's why we were very happy to organize this together. We'll hear notions such as imperial way of life that I've picked up on, which has come to its limit, but also, and very importantly, the link between just transition, this imperial way of life, and the strengthening and the rise of the far right across Europe. We had the chance to discuss that last evening. We'll see whether we may even collaborate between our institutes on the topic, to be seen, to be confirmed. But that would be, I think, wonderful. And no need to remind you, of course, that all of this is very relevant, including in face of the European election results that we had a few months ago, but then also much more recently, unfortunately, in Thüringen, in Saxony, in Germany, just a few days ago. So we'll dive into, or the panelists will dive into, difficult questions such as why do people vote for extreme right parties, for authoritarian parties, and also we'll bring out some research, some evidence that shows that working conditions have an important influence on how employees feel about democracy, which in the end also has an influence on how they vote. And that, of course, brings us then close to the topics that we follow up at that we research at the European Trade Union Institute, notably in our workers' participation research. So I'm very happy that Sara Lafuente, senior researcher, will be presenting on that topic, will be discussing on that topic. By contrast, I have to apologize, Isabel Schoman, who is our our acting general secretary, at the ETUI, did I say general secretary? Okay, I'm getting there. She's our acting general director. Yes, I got it in the end. She's also deputy general secretary at TTC, and she's ill. I confirm. We were in meetings till 5 and she was slowly fading. So, you know, she's apologized for today. By contrast, we have Bella here. You all know Bella. He's been doing a lot of research on the European Green Deal, on automotive, on wind, on so many aspects of this. We call him our Swiss knife, and he will be here with us today again. All right, some of the research that we have produced is over there on the tables, lots more online, and that's the end of my marketing talk. And I'm very happy now to be able to hand over to you, Neva, please. And thank you for being there, all of you.
Yeah, so thank you for this introduction. Welcome also from my side. I'm Neva Loh from the Institute of Economic and Social Research at the Hans-Böckler Stiftung, and I'll be facilitating this event today. So as we just heard, we're here today to discuss the question of the future of the green transition, but also and especially the role workplace democracy can and should play in enabling the green transition in a solidaristic way. So the event is co-organized by the ETUI, the European Trade Union Institute, and the Institute of Economic and Social Research of the Hans-Böckler Stiftung. So before I start introducing this topic in more detail, we've already heard a lot about it. I would like to draw your attention to a few organizational points of this event. The first is we are recording the debate, and it will then be put online. You can then watch it afterwards on the ETUI's YouTube channel and website. And we have planned this discussion until 2:15 today, and we will do our very best to also keep to that time frame. So now to the question of why we chose to organize an event about this topic right now in this political moment. We've already heard a few, and there are obviously numerous reasons why this is an essential topic right now. And I would just like to pick out and mention 3 reasons that I think will be relevant for our discussion today. The first reason is the political moment we are living in. The panel will include an interesting mix of perspectives that revolve around the very essential question of how do we describe the political moment we're living in? Or better, what is the political moment we are living in marked by? Because this is a moment that is unquestionably marked by one crisis after the other, by instability, by processes of transformation, but also around the anxiety around these processes of transformation. In a moment that is marked by struggles around the interpretations of what is happening, and around struggles around the distributional effects of the transformation processes. And our panel will dive into these questions from different but very much complementary angles. The second reason this event is particularly important now is unquestionably, well, the new European Commission's new term and the new political forces in the European institutions. So even though von der Leyen will remain the Commission's president, she will preside over a different commission, a different parliament, and different council with changed political forces. And it is still open which interests will prevail and how the European Green Deal will be continued. And especially is still open how strong the fossil fuel factions will remain and if the authoritarian right will continue to gain ground. Because what the authoritarian right does is to promise to uphold the status quo of life based on a production that is based on fossil fuels in an exclusionary way. And so the questions we have to ask are, where are the political forces aiming to democratize our economy, our society, and therefore also our workplaces? And what alliances are possible for these struggles? And the third reason, which was already mentioned, is particularly important this year. And it is because it has and continues to be a year of elections. So we've had European elections, we've had surprise elections in France, we've had 2 elections in London in Germany, with a 3rd one coming up, among others. So there are obviously other elections happening that will be pivotal to the future of democracy and the green transition. And so the questions we have to ask is, how do the election results reflect on the experiences people have at work and in their workplace? And how does workplace democracy and the daily experience people have translate into their approach towards democracy, towards trust in its institutions, and therefore also their willingness and their trust in transformation processes? And I find particularly this aspect pivotal and interesting because it takes the climate crises, European politics and struggles to the very concrete level of the workplace. So in this sense, I'm very happy to present our panel today. And our two presenters, Ulrich Brandt is a professor for international politics at the University of Vienna. He has recently published a book together with Markus Wissen called Capitalism as the Limit, which we just heard about. You can find the book on the table here. It was published in German, but I hear an English version is in the making and will be published next year. And then Bettina Kohlrausch, the director of the Institute of Economic and Social Research at the Hans-Böckler Stiftung, and professor for social transformation at the University of Paderborn. She has recently presented the first results of a study on election preferences and working conditions across 10 different EU countries. And we have also left copies of the press release on the table for those who would like to read it in paper format. And Bettina Kohlrausch will give a presentation of that study here today. And then I have the pleasure of introducing two discussants of the presentation who I will ask to join us on the panel after the presentations. Sarah Lafuente Hernandez is a senior researcher at the ETUI and focuses on democracy and workers' participation. And Bella Galgocci, who's a senior researcher also at the ETUI and focuses on the just transition and the European Green Deal. We will have two presentations, 15 minutes each, and then comments from Sarah and Bella. And I would then like to encourage you to ask questions. And now, without further ado, Ulrich, would you like to start with your presentation, Bettina?
So, good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation and the organizing, Neva Löw, Bettina, Bart, Sarah, Bela for also the invitation, the presentations, the comments. I'm not just glad to be here and honored, of course, to present some thoughts and my work, but I'm also excited because I think in this current constellation, trade unions, workers are key in stopping the far right and also to promote a green transition, a sustainability transformation, as we call it. I'm professor of international politics at Vienna University, but when I arrived in Vienna in 2007, some time ago already, started my professorship, I got in touch with the Chamber of Labor. And I noticed then I was invited and there was kind of a good exchange. And I noticed that there was no research going on in Austria on social, ecological issues and trade unions and transformation processes. So I carried out two empirical research projects. One is called Transformation of Labor and then a Conversion of Labor. The second one, on the first one, I also brought some publications. And on my last slide, I will have also a hint to the website of the ConLabor, where we delved and did research on possible potential transformation of the automotive sector in Austria, which is a very important sector for Austria. So what I want to do in 15 minutes is to remind us, since this opener of this panel, but Neva already also dealt with this topic, why we need urgently a green transformation. And then I want to introduce a concept Bart was already mentioning, why it's so difficult to change. And this is the concept I developed with Markus Wissen. We also got a copy, the English and the French version and the German version of the imperial mode of living. It's translated into 11 languages and many languages of so-called emerging economies, Chinese, Portuguese in Brazil, Arab, which shows us that obviously we make a point with this concept imperial mode of living. I will introduce it shortly. Some of you already might know it. And then I present also briefly the main ideas of the new book, Capitalism at the Limit. And we argue that there are different projects, contested projects, how to deal with the deepening climate crisis or the multiple crises Neva also mentioned. And not towards the end, but I hope in the last 5 minutes, since we are here in a trade union surrounding, I would like to outline, tackle briefly, quickly, 5 elements of a green transition, which is also hopefully provoking some aspects, some discussion, and then at the very end, some final thoughts and open questions. So we should remind us that we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80 to 95% by 2050. This is a huge challenge, a technological one, a political one, a social one. What does it mean? And also this applies to raw materials. But at the contrary, what we experience currently is what we could call, yeah, you might know this term, the Great Acceleration, a second Great Acceleration with the enormous development dynamics in countries like China, India, so that the use of resources, the use of energy, the fossil fuels is still growing at contrast to the requirements. There is a risk of even the destabilization of ecosystems. We have now also in Europe the experience of heavy rain, of drought. And we call this, in the first chapter of the new book, a monstrous normality. There is a desire to have normality. The Prime Minister, the Austrian Prime Minister Nehammer, now in his campaign, we have elections in 2 weeks, he always says, we want to be normal. We need normality. But we say the normality of the world we live in is monstrous, is destroying, yeah, is attractive, but it's destroying. So therefore, we need a reorganization of the mode of production and living. And this is very important to state up front. This needs to be socially just. I come back to this because this is a very important point to understand the authoritarian right, that the current project of a green modernization is not socially just. And this opens the door to the far right. It's the main chapter of our new book. So briefly, some of you might know it, what we mean by imperial mode of living. Please listen here always, the imperial mode of production and living. And we started to develop the project in the economic and financial crisis 2009. And we wanted to understand why this was kind of the indicator, why the most attractive and the most successful policy measure in this crisis of 2008-2009 was in Austria, in Germany, the so-called scrapping bonus, that the state gave people money to get rid of their even functioning car, but to destroy it, not to sell it, and to buy a new car to stabilize the automotive sector, of course. But why was this the case? We had already a strong politicization of the climate crisis, the need of climate policies, and we wanted to better understand why capitalism, which means, of course, the power of capital, the power of states, why this is so deeply inscribed into everyday practices of people. And this is our argument, that in the everyday reproduction of lives through consumption at the workplace, yeah, when in the factories, in the offices, lives are reproduced in a more or less attractive way by accessing, by consuming, by using commodities that are produced elsewhere under usually poor, bad, destructive social and environmental conditions. I already discussed why we use imperial. Imperial means not imperialistic. Imperial means to refer to an elsewhere, yeah? to the fossil energy, to the metal resources, to the minerals, to the cheap labor force of China, etc., but not because people are bad, but they have their cell phone, they have their car, they have cheap meat. I always say in Austria, there's a supposed human right to the daily schnitzel, but to the cheap schnitzel, yeah, which is of course produced under ethically, environmentally, and socially very, very bad conditions. This imperial mode of living, this everyday reproduction is made invisible. And I insist, it's not that people have bad intentions. It's part of capital strategies of state free trade, for example, that this is kind of made, but we should understand that it's very attractive to many people, and also in many developing countries or countries of the global south, yeah, who earns money, who makes a career in China, India, Brazil, or wherever. Also, people want to fly for holidays or want to have a car or the daily schnitzel, etc., etc. So I leave it here and we can discuss it. this was 2017. It was a kind of an conceptual work. The book was, as I said, it was also translated. And an interesting indicator as an academic is when you get invitations to contribute to handbooks. I think we now wrote 10 or 12 handbook entries on the imperial mode of living. That obviously it's interesting also for the debate. The new book, which will come out with Polity in next June, Polity Press. It's more a time diagnosis, and I think this brought me the invitation here to Brussels. What we want to show in the new book, Capitalism at the Limit, is that this imperial mode of living not comes to an end, but is kind of the norm, is more and is obviously reaching its ecological limits. We have this debate since 20, 30 years, but the limits are now as an experience also in the countries of the global north. So the contested character to perform the imperial mode of living is becoming more and more obvious, and the ecological limits. If you look at the literature, the climate endgame, a famous article published 2 years ago by the major scholars Schellenhuber, Rockström, and et al. They also, natural scientists, say we are really, really in trouble. Or of course, the IPCC report. The second aspect of capitalism at the limit is that capitalism, of course, not as a subject, as a complex social relations, capitalism was, or the dominant forces were historically able to use crises to modernize itself in a way. So the crisis of 29, the financial crisis of the Black Friday, led at one hand to fascism. We should not kind of forget, but in some, and looking from today, it led to a form of democratic capitalism, as Offe, Habermas, and others calls it. That kind of stronger trade unions, the whole history here in the room of trade unions, of workers' rights, etc., etc. So capitalism answered with industrial capitalism, with mass production, mass consumption, in my words, with the imperial mode of living in a way. The crisis of the 70s also provoked certain reactions. One reaction was to the Club of Rome, Limits to Growth report, etc., the politicization of the ecological crisis, that a form of ecological modernization took place. Ecological modernization was not to really question the very foundations of capitalism, of the growth machinery, but at least to deal with the negative consequences. And neoliberalism was another answer. And the externalization also is a problem when countries like China say we also want to produce with the imperial mode of production and living. And so you know this from green grabbing, land grabbing, that now we have the competition over land and resources. I speed up a bit because I already speak 10 minutes. So the major argument, and I think this is important for our debate, is there are different, we call it projects, coming from a tradition some of you might know of Antonio Gramsci, regulation theory, that projects are not kind of declared by people, but projects are, we can detect with in social sciences, are relevant directions, relevant orientations of powerful, of relevant actors. And the first one is, think of Trump, think of the right-wing forces, what we call the authoritarian stabilization of the imperial mode of living. The second is the dominant one, the European Green Deal was already mentioned. It's an ecological modernization of capitalism. And a third one is a solidary mode of living in a very broad sense. I leave collapse out, we can get into. I also only mention the famous study from Lucas Chancel, collaborator of Thomas Piketty, who coined this term 2 years ago of ecological inequality. We can come back to this. So 2 points when it comes to those projects, and then I end with some thoughts for our discussion. We argue when it comes to the ecological modernization of capitalism that this is very important, but it does not question the very foundation of the capitalist growth machinery. It's green growth, but we know from many studies that green growth still needs resources and energy. There's no absolute decoupling taking place. There's some relative decoupling in technical terms. And the whole project of ecological modernization, yeah, let's say the European Green Deal, some here in the room work much more on this than I, is a neo-colonial project. It's not a project that really tries to go for more international corporations and to leave the room for countries of the global south and to really reduce here the materiality, the use of resources of energy. I leave it here. And the second, or first or second aspect, the authoritarian stabilization of capitalism is, it was already mentioned, is this, kind of incredible pace of the rise of the far right, of the authoritarian right. And of course, we know all the arguments of social media, the racist everyday consciousness of many people, the authoritarian desire, scapegoating with migrants. But we make 2 points for the debate which seem to us very important. The first point is, we argue and we think that the deficiency, the major deficiency of the ecological modernization strategy, European Green Deal, is that it's not just. It's not a just transition. And this means, and we know this from surveys, for many people, for many workers, that it's experienced as ecological austerity. So they know from neoliberalism, 30 years of austerity, and now the elites, the political and economic elites, Habeck, the German climate minister, said 2 years ago, we need the austerity and you have to consume less. You are the people. But the elites still have their private jets, Lucas Chancel, they have a huge ecological footprint, climate footprint. So we argue, of course, in a more sophisticated way, that there is a backlash because this serious attempt of an ecological modernization of capitalism, the first project, is not dealing with power questions. It's not tackling power. Yeah, it's just kind of the important decarbonization of the economy, but it does not go beyond. And this is a challenge for, I would say, progressive forces and, of course, trade unions. And the second argument is we use Kara Dudgett's famous concept, some of you might know, petromasculinity. Dudgett shows in her really exciting study how fossil capitalism and masculinity co-evolved. And she shows, and there's also a study we quote done in Vienna about the speeches of Herbert Kickl, the leader of the FPÖ, and of Björn Höcke, the leader in Thüringen of the AfD, how they talk to this menaced petromasculinity. Yeah, they say the Greens, the elites want to take away your car, your combustion engine car. So this is a very powerful discourse, and we should take it seriously. And the third project, no, Neva said that I have some minutes more. I'm happy about this. The third project we should call green transition here, or a solidary transformation. And I hope that this became clear. We need to question basic principles of capitalism, the growth principle, the colonial implication of capitalism and others. And I would like to outline briefly 5 elements. Bettina will deal with the first one. The first is, again, so this is our argument in the book, also a major strategy against the de-democratization, the authoritarian move of the far right is a deepening of democratization. It's an insisting, and you show this in your study, is to insist in participation, to insist in enabling people to participate, to do to be democratic citizens, but also at the workplace. But this would mean also at the material level, and I think we don't have an answer for this yet, to question the old idea of social democracy, not as a party, but the old idea of the material democracy, which is based on growth and which is based on exploitation, on the exploitation of nature. So how can we rethink democracy? We talked about Blüdorn, he has not an answer as well. Ingo Blüdorn, the sociologist from Austria. How to rethink democracy under the conditions of material constraints, under the conditions of planetary boundaries. Yeah? And we need urgently not only academic work, but also political initiatives to deal with it. And this is so important. I just make one point on this slide. And I remind you of Karl Marx, the 18th premier, of Louis Bonaparte, of Franz Neumann, Behemoth, and recent work from Sonja Buckel. In times of crisis, the bourgeois forces, the capital forces, tend to become authoritarian. This was the rise of fascism in Germany, of course, and then of Austria. So we have to be very aware that it's not only a political party, the AfD or the right-wing parties also in other countries, but we have to be aware that in a moment of a deepening economic crisis, parts of the elites, parts of capital might ally with the far right. This is the historic experience, yeah? And Marx detected it in his wonderful text, the 18th premier, from 1852. The second element is, I can be brief because this is clear, I think here, not to think in terms of austerity, but to think in terms of a different prosperity, a resource-light, energy-light prosperity, but the prosperity as a social form, not prosperity, as I said, decarbonization. Decarbonization is key, but prosperity is to think in political ecology, we say our provisioning systems differently, the provisioning system of mobility, of nutrition, of housing, to make cities. We have so many proposals, yeah, to rethink our well-being, yeah, and to take this seriously and to fight for it politically. And the reduction of working hours you will present it is a key for this aspect. A third element of a green transition, I think we should start to think about it. I'm curious what Bela is going to say. My impression is, I'm not, of course, familiar with the Brussels debate here in this very intense surroundings. My impression is that competitiveness and international competition is kind of a doxa, is a truth which is not questionable. The growth question is more and more questionable, I would say, but the competitiveness is not a questionable. So I would claim, and I would motivate us to think, if we take a green transition seriously, and if we want to overcome cheap fossil fuels, we need to rethink the competitiveness of our economies. How do we prepare when it's not enough hydrogen energy? How do we prepare for the production of steel, of chemicals, etc., when we really overcome fossil dependency? Yeah, I think we even need to understand the problem and then to create solutions. The fourth aspect, I think, is quite clear, but still, of course, in trade union surrounding, still a provocation. I would say we need a perspective of degrowth. Degrowth is not that we cheer the crisis, the economic crisis, because a crisis is usually a kind of occurs on the back of workers. Yeah, but a planned, yeah, this is the idea of degrowth, a planned transformation, change by design, not change by disaster, a planned transformation of our societies. And for me, degrowth is to overcome the capitalist growth imperative, which is different from to overcome growth, to overcome the capitalist growth imperative. And the last aspect is that we need, very close to, of course, degrowth and questioning competitiveness, is that we need a form of industrial conversion. Yeah, it needs to be selective, but we need, I would say, we need to reduce the automotive sector. We need to reduce industrial agriculture and others in order to cope with the crisis. Since I talked already 22 minutes, I leave my last questions out and maybe for the debate. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you for this very interesting and on-the-point analysis. And now, Bettina, I would like to invite you to give your presentation when we've got PowerPoint.
Okay, here we are. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming. And thank you for this opportunity BART and ETUI of cooperation, which hopefully is just the beginning of a longer collaboration on these issues, the far right. We are talking today about what future for the green transition. And I mean, that's quite obvious, but maybe important to say in these times that, of course, in democracies, the future of the green transition depends on public support. And this support at the moment is at stake, as we, for example, just saw in Germany, in Thüringen and Sachsen. And the reason, I mean, there is in social science a long debate about why is this, or can this declining support come from? And the argument often made is that transformations such as, for example, the socio-ecological change may create new conflicts between losers and winners of this transformation. For example, the e-transformation in the car industry, which leads to a situation where you just simply need less workers to produce a car. And of course, you have winners of this development, but also losers. And some groups, for example, industrial workers, might consider, due to this development, their relative, of course, if we have a global perspective, position, and also their status threatened. And in social science, but also in the public, there is a kind of debate on why actually, or where the status threats actually come from. And the one argument is that it's rather a cultural, that now a new cultural cleavage occurs between kind of different lifestyles, and that those who used to, for example, work in the car industry, live not in the big cities, but rather in the rural areas, who have 2 or 3 cars, like, for example, parts of my family have, that they not only consider that they consider their lifestyle a threat, and that they also consider this development and what we just talked about as a devaluation of a particular kind of work, of a particular kind of qualifications, or even of lifetime achievements, maybe even if you think of the coal industry over generations. And so this is rather a cultural perspective on this. And this is why it is often, and we will see whether this is true or not, so a little cliffhanger, that particularly like the industry workers have very high resentments against this green transitions. And the other argument focused rather on financial worries. The argument is that particularly low-income groups who suffer most, for example, from rising energy prices, which we experience in Germany, and in many other European countries, that they are just feel threatened by this development, because this comes along with real economic hardship for them. So this would not so much refer to cultural cleavages or conflicts, but rather the good old distributional conflicts, maybe the old cleavage between capital and work. However, both lead to feelings of resentment against the green transition and our problem, therefore. And these resentments could be a fertile breeding ground for anti-democratic attitudes, and this might strengthen far-right parties throughout Europe or the world, if we look at Trump, for example. And of course, this in turn could destabilize democratic structures and instruments, and these instruments and structures we need to regulate and foster the green transition. So we are really dependent on public support for this project. And this brought us to our questions when we conducted our survey. And one question was, actually, I mean, are there resentments? I mean, I'm a social scientist, so is there what we expect and take for granted really there? This is what we are doing in quantitative research. So are there resentments against the green transitions, and from whom? And then, of course, what could mitigate these resentments? And the third question is, are these resentments actually a breeding ground for anti-democratic attitudes? And because this is also not the same, also for voting intentions for extreme right-wing parties. And this is what we've tried to find out, and we collected a big data set, here you see it, with 10 countries. In each country, 1,500 respondents. We only focused on the labor force because we're interested in work. The data collection was at the end of last year, mid-November until end of December. It has been an online, this is just for who's interested in an online access panel, which means it's not a random sample, and which means that we have to be a bit careful with statements regarding representativeness. However, we did a validation with other data sets and they went quite well. So I think it's good data with the limitations online access panels have. And then in this data, or in this survey, we ask very simply, to what extent are you worried that the measures governments take against climate change might negatively affect your job and career prospects? And this is what we ask. We also, by the way, ask this for digitalization. All I'm telling you about the green transition today is also true for digitalization. I just don't present it here because we are focusing on the green transition today. And what we see in the first step is that in all countries, about half the people are a bit or strongly worried on average in the European country. And then, of course, we do see differences, like apparently in Sweden, people are not that much worried, while, for example, in Germany and France, they are. However, this is exactly what I warned for like 1 minute ago. Be a bit careful with comparing the distribution among countries. These are exactly the limitations of the data, but still it gives us a first impression. And then we wanted to know who is actually worried about the green transition, and what we see, and this we do also see, we saw it in multivariate regressions, but also in simple distributions here on the right side. We do see that people with very low or low income have highest fears about or job-related worries about the green transition. And interesting is also that we do see differences in between countries. For example, we just remember that Sweden had lowest parts of people worried about the green transition, but highest of worries between the lowest of those with the lowest incomes. So we see the distribution in between countries, between those with high incomes and lower incomes, also vary. However, we do have a common pattern. We do see that apparently worries about the green transition are highest among, or are dependent on the income. We also saw, and this is interesting but not new, that union members are more concerned about the green transitions. This goes in line with findings, for example, of Trapman, who also found this. And there are two explanations for this. The first is that among union members, there's a higher awareness for the consequences of the socio-ecological transition. And the second is that people who feel insecure because of the transition become union members. So the latter is maybe more attractive, and the former, I think, is more realistic, to be honest. But we do not know exactly. We have to explore this in more detail. Interesting, and this refers to the debate I just explained about old or new cleavages. We saw no differences according to education or white or blue collar workers. So this does not make to seem that much differences. And also we did not see any difference, or not, I mean, this is not significant differences, sorry, it's multivariate analysis. So, but apparently it doesn't make a difference whether from what sector of employment you come from, company size and type of contract. So it seems that the worries rather are about social protection in the green transition and not so much about a lifestyle. Okay, this should look different, but never mind. But it's not only about social protection, it's also about economic citizenship rights and working conditions. And economic citizenship rights is something we are doing a lot of research on, and I could talk for hours, but I won't. But it's really, the main idea is that these are rights that people gain due to the fact that they work, that they have gainful employment. And these are rights that fortify the decommodification of work. So it's democratic rights like having a works council, bargaining, but also protection at work, and of course rights such as social security in times of unemployment or after work. And we tried to find out, and that's not so easy if you have to find scales which work in each country. And we tried to find out whether people do have these rights. And we had one scale, it's called Workers' Voice, where we ask for voice and participation. Just to give you an example, I feel ignored when it comes to decisions on my day-to-day work. Or openness to union. In my company, I can talk openly about works councils and trade unions without having fear of disadvantages. And we also ask for working conditions like autonomy, self-improvement, career opportunities. And then we ask for satisfaction with work and working conditions. This is job satisfaction, but also payment. And what we found is that there is a negative correlation between, in every country, it's significant between these three scales, but highest for workers or lowest for workers' voice and job varies, which means the higher the possibility to democratically participate in the workplace, the lower are the varies. I know that these correlations are not that high, but I didn't present it here. We are still also working for this. We found quite strong correlations for Germany. If you look at single items, like, for example, autonomy, it's much, much higher. So we are still working on it. Maybe the scales also not so working so good for this. Sorry, I'm very technical. But but there is something. There's something. The working conditions have the potential to mitigate worries about the green transitions. And it's not only about material or financial insecurities. I think it's also about something like efficacy. It's about control. And it's about the possibility to participate in this process. And this is what people experience at work, because this is where it finally takes place, the transitions. People do the transition while working. So now I come to the third question. Are these job worries about the transformation relevant for voting preferences of the far right? And before answering this question, I just want you to show that in many countries, everywhere where you have this little flag, it's a significant interrelationship. But you can see in a vast majority of countries, people who are worried about the transformation are less satisfied with democracy, assess democracy as less important, express less trust in institutions, and trust in institutions is very, very, very important to keep societies together. Less trust in the EU and more negative attitudes towards immigration. So these are anti-democratic attitudes which are often mobilized by far-right parties. And this is what we also see, that at least in 5 countries, we do have in Hungary, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, and France, there is even a significant interrelationship between job worries regarding the green transition and voting intention for the far right. And my last technical comment, but this is a regression, which means we controlled for income, education, and so on and so on. So this is independent. Even people having the same gender, having the same income, having whatever, the same education, those of these people being the same who worries about the transformation has the higher probability to vote for the far right. So it makes really a difference. And this is why, now I come to my conclusion, it's important to think about it. So what we saw is that job varies are, the distribution of job varies is high in most countries, but varies according to the financial situation, working conditions, democratic participation, and union membership in all European countries, but not according to blue or white collar jobs. So it's not, I mean, put it a bit bluntly, but it's not about the stupid and stubborn workers who do not understand how important the green transition is. It's about financial worries, which people may have for very good reasons. To put it in a more positive way, we could say higher financial security and better working conditions tend to mitigate worries about the green transitions. And these are good news because we do have a lot of institutions working who could organize and guarantee better working conditions. Worries about the transformation strengthens anti-democratic attitudes and, as a result, far-right parties. And this, of course, just makes clear how important a socially just and cushioned organization of the transformation becomes. And this is, of course, the reason why progressive forces in the EU should therefore have an interest in shaping these transformation processes in a socially just way, just as Ulrich has said. So I forgot the thank you, but I say thank you. Thank you very much for listening. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bettina, for this insightful and very in-depth analysis. I would now like to invite Sarah and Bella to come to the podium for their comments to the presentation. Stay here. And it's like, Bella, since I've understood that you have to leave a bit earlier, I'll invite you to start your comment. You have focused your work on the European Green Deal and the just transition. And I'd be very interested to hear your comments about the two presentations you heard.
Thank you, Neva, and thank you also to taking me first, because I have to catch a train. It's a pity and have to leave quite soon. How many minutes I have now? Like 5 or 7?
7 to 10. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So first of all, yes, indeed, I'm Bela Gogotsi, ETUI, and in the last 10, 15 years, we were doing research on the green transformation. So that means like restructuring, plant level branch, and so on, and looking at the consequences on labor, on employment, and social consequences. So out of this, and thank you to Ulrich and Bettina for the very inspiring thoughts and presentations. And if you allow me to be a little bit provocative, I will do it like that. So first of all, about imperial way of living. This is an extremely important aspect to point to, and this is clearly showing how unsustainable this exploitative economic model is, and especially in regard to global North and global South. The question is only, does everybody in the global North have an imperial mode of living? Saxony, Thuringen, Poland, Romania, and Pennsylvania. So that means that the inequality within the global North makes it extremely difficult to deal with this, well, historical injustice that is certainly based on this colonialist and exploitative both in terms of material, but both in terms of humans exploiting humans. And I would even say that if you mention this in Saxony, imperial way of living, they will be not very happy. So that means it is a difficult thing. And we were simply not capable of addressing these deeply entrenched inequalities in our societies, not to speak about the global south. And the European Green Deal actually, well, didn't help in this. So I mean, it was first of all, it's a historical project. It's really an important thing. It was beyond expectation, and beyond expectation was also that it is being implemented. You know, it is not just a declarative thing. It is concrete. It is going down into very detailed buildings, cars, industry, not so much agriculture yet. But the basic things about European Green Deal, that it is technology-driven, market-based, decarbonization, and it is based on green growth. And well, it can be a long discussion, but alternatives do we have? Because we need technology, there is no question about it. Without that, it wouldn't go. We are in a market economy, and currently we don't really have alternatives for that. So this is what actually is there. But one thing is clear, that a transformation model that is setting on technology and market is creating more inequality, not less. It is the nature of things. You know, any change creates inequality. So the inequality is then on square. And any policies that were developed, that trade unions were advocating from the beginning on just transition and so on, we have instruments there. We have criticized it with my colleagues a lot, how a patchwork it is, and how it is like, well, I wouldn't say it's a decorative element, it is more than that, but it is not fully addressing the whole thing. And these are the distributional effects, these are the employment change effects, and these are the accessibility and availability of low carbon technologies. So there are two aspects of that, the social cushioning and the enabling change dimension, and this is missing. And this is why it is really, really striking back. And this is why we have the backlash. And for an answer, well, okay, what is happening now, as you see with the Draghi report, is saying growth, growth, and more growth, yeah? And competitiveness, the competitiveness is being redefined, but my feeling is that the definition, it is still to come, and labor and unions should certainly need to have a say on that competitiveness is definitely not or shouldn't be based on low labor costs. It is not a cost competitiveness, and it is not even an energy price competitiveness, because that wouldn't work either. Of course, it is a transformation achievement, and industry needs to deliver on that. So that makes the whole thing, well, tricky, at least. And of course, not to forget that Europe is simply not mobilizing money enough. So and we have this timely dimension that is actually the core of the problem, that clearly we have, well, for the transformation, front-loaded investment needs, and the costs and the burdens are in the beginning, and we have huge wins there. So it is absolutely clear that in a mid or long term, it makes a huge return. But somehow the ways to bridge these two, so the mobilize the money for the transition, is simply not possible. I mean, I just heard today that Germany is cutting or stopping any investment in battery research in the new budget. Jesus, okay. So I mean, that is so. I mean, so social protection is critical, but I would say that, and here I come a little bit to Bettina, that workers' participation, democracy at work, and managing this change is important. Yeah, so the democracy part is really important, and that means that we need structures that shaping this change. You know, it is not the change that is happening over your head, but to shape it, and there are actually a couple of good examples for that. So in actually the German industry, there are many pacts for the future that are forward-looking. They are considering investment, employment, training, and making an agreement with the management. It is a combination of collective bargaining and framework agreements. So the concrete format of these agreements is still a little bit in the air, and it is a challenge for trade unions actually, because what is the role of the Works Council? What is the role of the union? But these are showing actually positive things. I'm afraid I'm running out.
8.5 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so then oh yeah, I still have, okay, so one remark on the far right, it was really an impressive survey and very interesting results. It is, well, the far right has no policy, no concept, and nothing, yeah? So they are only fishing in the opportunity where you can create havoc and disruption in the political system. So they are capitalizing on it. And this also means that at least not in all countries is the far right linked to the denial of the green transition. And I would pick just one example, Hungary, because Hungary was already there. And you saw that actually the fear was actually not so high in Hungary, but they had the highest support for the far right. And they have actually a far right government for already more than 10 years. And even part of the opposition is even more far right than the anyway far right government. But what is happening is that actually decarbonization is happening. They have mushrooming battery factories everywhere. There is no worker enough to fill these battery factories. So and also like so the green transition is really not really an issue. In the debate, it is much more about migration and all the rest. But so, well, okay. Yeah, then thank you. And sorry for leaving after a few minutes.
Thank you, Bella. Now to you, Sarah. You have focused on democracy, work, and workers' participation, and you are even a co-founder of the network Democratizing Work, which is a global network and which demands the democratization, decommodification, and decarbonization of work. So I'm very interested to hear your perspective on the presentations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Neva. And well, thanks, of course, to the speakers here who presented their publications. I actually wanted to congratulate you personally as well, and also to the colleagues that organized, Neva, Maria, to have been brave enough to bring these topics together, because it's far from evident to discuss in a same panel about green transition, about political democracy and workplace democracy. And I think it's it's becoming more and more relevant to link these topics that used to be addressed in silos in research, but also in activist movements. So we are, as you were, Neva, very well introducing before, we are in a sort of momentum where we see these forces coming together. And since we are dealing with these, large global crisis that you very well describe in your research, it seems that not one single expertise can tackle the magnitude of the problems we are addressing, right? So I thought it was a very brave exchange and idea to organize this panel. And of course, well, I was very impressed with the publications, with the survey from the WSI, with the publication that I will need to read in English more extensively once it is published in English as well. But basically the questioning of how capitalism produced, right, and hides certain effects, to start with Ulrich intervention. This actually brings very naturally to how capitalism is governed, right? How it is managed, but also who rules, who decides, and how is it decided what we produce and for whom, right? So it is this question of power that I think links very well the two presentations together and the two publications. And that, of course, links with some work that the ETUI has been doing for a long time, more focused on board level employee representation, but actually how to bring workers' voice and worker participation to the strategic level of decision making within companies, which is also an area where power can be discussed and can be challenged, right? So aside from the more larger economic, political economy. So here this also links with proposals and perhaps more transformative proposals that are coming from the academia, but not only, also from the cooperative movement as well. Bringing ideas like the economic bicameralism that we find in publications from Ferreras, where at least there is a thought and a reflection on how we could actually work beyond the current institutions that we have, that date, of course, from a period of industrial democracy where growth was the norm and was taken as the frame, right? And now we are talking about planetary boundaries. So this is a new context we have to work in. And how can we bring workers' voice to a larger sphere of control, of deciding about the share of what is produced and what is shared and for whom? So that I found very interesting. Another idea that I really found compelling and that tackles really on the momentum was the issue of the diversity of voices that you bring about, and how it is important to include outsiders, because we need to inspire. We need to also, there is a need to inspire and to mobilize towards action, right? So in that sense, the mobilization bottom up, so the idea of including different disciplines as well, and this we are seeing that more and more the discipline of philosophy or historians or other political theory are more and more engaging in these big topics of green transition or the ecological crisis and workplace democracy. So I found this very important also at the actors level, who acts. And here we are in a trade union institute, or well, very close trade union institution of research as well in Germany. And in fact, we have many different actors operating, bringing ideas and bringing action in the ground to find transformative solutions on that regard. So we have the trade unions, also from the grassroots. We have interesting experiments going on and quite innovative that try to enlarge and extend the strategies of trade unions in the workplace to deal with green transition, so to green with ecological issues. I can mention like one interesting case in GKN, which was a good example of an automotive, well, an industry that was bought out by their workers, and they created a cooperative in Italy, right? But also something similar replicated in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, where the workers bought out, supported by the trade unions, in order to reorient the production of the site into a more green-oriented solution. So that's only an example I could think of, but of course there are many different initiatives going on. And of course, we have the multi-scalar and the multi-level situation here. So you diagnosed very well problems and effects that are taking place globally. And these also question us, trade unions, researchers, how we can also act and organize globally. And this has been an eternal, very long-term challenge for unions, of course, in Europe already, because we have already this discussions how to organize, coordinate, find European identities. It's already a challenge within Europe, but now we have to even expand larger and look at Southern Asia and look at other places of the world where European multinationals are exploiting and are having huge effects on the environment. Sorry for this. I just had to maybe 2 comments, questions for both of you that I will address more openly. One is on the, so we were talking about power, of course, but more concretely, and I'm sorry that Isabelle Schumann could not be here today because I'm pretty sure she would address the more political aspect of it and what can institutions do, the ones that we currently have at European level and at national level and somewhere else. I just wanted to hear the authors perhaps elaborate a bit more on where do you think the focus should be put, or where do we have more chances to see some sort of regulation, some sort of power taken back by worker voice? Is it at the European level within the institutions? Are you thinking more of renationalization? Because I read it somewhere in the notes I had from Ulrich, so that's why I'm mentioning it. Or is there a possibility? Are we compelled to go back to the publics and to share another conception of ownership and common good that could allow, workers' voice to go forward and to get back control on the issues at stake, which are huge? And one question, perhaps, or just comment that struck me a bit in the survey, which I find really impressive, and it's really nice, and I'm looking forward to read the whole report. But I was particularly surprised by some of the results for Hungary, Poland, and Italy, right? And perhaps you didn't mention that, but maybe it's interesting because in a way you found similar results there in terms of the correlations you found between good working conditions, if I'm not mistaken at the moment, good working conditions and a sort of support, trust in institutions. But in fact, we are here talking about countries that have right-wing, well, extreme right governance at the moment. So my question is, shouldn't we, is there something wrong with our conception of democracy, actually? Are we just taking a concept of democracy in our research and in our narratives that we should sort of question itself? Because if our research is tending or is making us to assume that, well, people that are comfortable with their working conditions, with their voice or whatever, they will just simply accept the status quo, maybe not so much democracy as in terms of values, in terms of inclusive processes and so forth, but simply the status quo, which brings to Ulrich's comment on the bourgeoisie in this kind of crisis potentially being, well, potentially supportive of the extreme right. Why not? To support the status quo. So I'll leave it there. Sorry, it was just a reflection. I hope I stayed on time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those really interesting questions. I would suggest, given that we have 10 minutes left, to take a quick round of questions and then give Bettina and Ulrich the possibility to answer maybe more extensively on all the questions that have been raised. So I think I would suggest to take a round of 3 really quick questions, no comments, but questions. We already have 2 here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jane Parker, ETUI. Thank you, Ulrich, Bettina, Sarah, and Bella, who's not here. But there were a number of linkages between your comments as well that were fascinating. Thank you very much. One of the things that I've noticed in a burgeoning literature is the focus in relation to just transition and climate change on indigeneity and more Western standpoints and philosophies. So without over-egging it or understating it, for example, indigenous perspectives that might stress relativism and pluralism, and Western viewpoints, plural, that might emphasize more positivism and, say, rationalism. And for me, this goes to the heart of when we're looking at what are our value sets, what are our means of production, how do workers come to work, and what is important in those contexts. So I just wondered if this not infiltrates, that's the wrong word and a bit Freudian, but I just wondered if this comes through your work, because as Sarah says, some of this is yet to be published later next year, I understand. So thank you again for your contributions. Cheers.
Yeah, Willy de Bakker, ETUI. I have two quick questions. The first one is to Bettina and to Sarah. Do you think that there is enough connection between the democracy at work people who are working at trade unions, basically, and the deliberative democracy thinkers? I mean, there's lots of people who are working on citizens panels and how to kind of reignite our democracy in a way. And I have the impression we have done with the ETUI, as far as I remember, only one debate with Helen Landemore at some point, but I think trade unions should do much more work on that and connect those two communities. That's the first little point. And then more fundamentally, the problem is that we are now actually not in a great acceleration period anymore, but we're in a great deceleration period. And this deceleration period means that we need to find ways of, first of all, being aware of it and also being able to communicate to citizens that we're in a deceleration era, which is very difficult because we will have to say, people, you will need to make sacrifices. And that quickly can be used by all the neoliberals and all the others, the authoritarians, to go into, more austerity is needed, whereas more sufficiency is needed. So the debate between that we need to have is on sufficiency versus austerity. And then one of the things that we see is that we have a metamorphosis of democracy because of this deceleration. And this metamorphosis of democracy for the moment is better used by the extreme right because actually they have an authoritarian, which I call the billionaire approach, you know. It's just make the billionaires richer. Why do you think that Musk yesterday really made a fantastic applause for Draghi's report? This is not for nothing, because Musk really understands what this Draghi report means. And actually our own reactions from the left are most of the time state, state, state. We need more state. We need green state. We need more investment. We need Keynesianism, basically, green Keynesianism. What about community? What about the commons? Let's think about that much more. Thanks.
Thank you. Yannis Perifonos from Syriac. It was mostly connected to the question before, like, given the presentations you made, Professor Brad, that the capitalists in times of no crisis, but in difficult times, they tend to favor the more authoritarian, the more extreme regimes, and then they know the way how to enforce them. So I think this is more dangerous. What you presented today, both, is more dangerous than it appears. And we need to reconsider again what is our position as researchers or as unions on this game. Because if they have both ends of the rope, the capitalists, I mean, they can do whatever. And if they can influence the views of the people to more far-right regimes, then we need to act really fast and really quick. And it's also connected with ecology. But this is now the results of the research regarding the working environment, how it can affect the far-right views. Actually, they have both ends of the rope. So it's really a trap.
Thanks a lot. Roland Kulke from Transform Europe. Very short. What do you think about the Letter and Draghi report yesterday? It was already mentioned. Are there any positive things where you can say, okay, if we really dig deep in and we might find something from your, we also have mentioning commons now, whatever. Is there anything despite slogans like competitiveness and monopolies or something? Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the questions. We can stay in this room a little longer, as I understand. So now I would give the opportunity to Bettina first to answer the broad set of questions, and then Ulrich, and then, yeah, we won't finish too late, I think.
So, yeah, thank you very much for these interesting questions and comments. I don't know if I can answer all of them. So maybe I start with one issue Bela raised, whether it is actually true that the green transition is an issue of the far right. It really is not. It differs in between countries, but what I think is that, as at least also what Ulrich said, as the way it is played out right now, the green transition is really likely to foster inequalities. And I think what the far right, and this is what people actually experience right now. For example, for Germany, we found that during COVID, but also much more strongly during the high energy prices due to the war in the Ukraine, those with lower incomes had really high income losses, and we had a negative development of net wages and so on and so on. So they already really lose money. And I think this, of course, increases social inequalities. And I think what the far right does in all countries very successful is to reshape these conflicts between these social conflicts in conflicts between insiders and outsiders of societies. So they mobilize it maybe not for agenda again the green transition, but then for agenda again migration. So they address this then maybe more implicitly, but they do. Then I'm so bad with notes. I can't even read my writing. I'm sorry. So I just hope I at least mention a few questions. I found really interesting what you said, and it's really like, yeah, I know you're totally right, our concept of democracy, because not everyone, if you read our press release, you will find that in general, people who trust in institutions are more likely not to vote for the far right. But in Hungary, Italy, and even Poland, because the PiS was then still PiS in power, it's different. So people who are vote for the far right trust more in institutions, and this raises the question whether trust in institution is a sign or a concept belonging to democracy, or just about whatever, yeah, being satisfied with the current situation. But we have other content, we have to explore it in more detail. But one good thing, we found that people with better working conditions have also in Hungary, also in Poland and Italy, higher trust in the EU. And so against the agenda of the government. So it's a bit, it's not so clear, bit blurry findings. And also we have other scales which I didn't report. It's called group-focused enmity. So, and this is a concept which is, in my understanding, quite clearly linked to democracy, and we have to focus on this more. But we also see that this is lower when people are better integrated via work. So it has the potential, and I think this, what also I think Bela said it, enabling is here the key word. The feeling, the experience of being enabled to do something and to be independent or to control your own life is really important. And this is an experience people make in the context of work. But I totally agree. And you found our sore spot. And we have to think it about much more. Also, the question democracy inside and outside work. I totally agree, and it's really interesting that these debates, because we also have research on this, are hardly linked. We had, I don't know, Axel Honneth had a book about, it's called The Working Sovereign, and he did it recently. We have, of course, in the context of the whole debate of social rights and Marshall and so on and so on, we had this debate. Also, the debate about citizenship and conflict theory addressed these issues, but it's kind of lost. It's not so present in current debates, but there is something, and it's certainly worth to think about it. And this is why I like this concept of economic, or I mean, like original, it's called industrial citizenship. But I think it may lead us a bit in the wrong way, because it's not only about industry, it's about economical rights, actually. And also, I really liked your comment about a state on community. This is what I always say. The opposite of market is not the state, the community and the society. And this is where democracy takes place or should take place. This is democratization for me. And this is also something we do not think about so much. But also, for example, in Germany, in the social security systems, but also workplace democracy is exactly that, taking responsibility back into the society. And this is also why they were implemented, or what they were implemented for, to also leave not all the power, or to not leave all the power to the parliaments, but also to take it into the society. So I think that's really important. And also an angle where we maybe can approach these questions from, because I think it's an attractive idea, because we have this anti-etatism, which is very well established. Between like Greens and the liberal, and of course the liberals, and I think maybe this is also something where we can make coalitions in the society, to say democracy is not only about the states, democracy is not only about the states, about societies. I cannot really say something about the Draghi report, because I haven't read it properly yet and just listened on the radio. I think as far as what I understood from my radio listening this morning is, what we can take from this is that we have, what also Bela said, to mobilize much more money to shape really this green transition. And this is something I think which is certainly true. And I'm coming from Germany. I know this is more or less common ground in most countries. In others, it's not. And I can say it's really a big problem also for democracy if you just deny the fact that this transition costs money in the beginning. So I would leave it here, and thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the question. I take 3, maximum 4 minutes. The Draghi report I didn't read either, but we will have a coffee afterwards, Roland, and then we can talk about it. And also, I think it's very worth to follow up this debate on democracy, participation. Where does it take place? What is the state about? 2, 3 remarks. One on the great deceleration. I find it interesting, but the great acceleration, the term refers to the metabolism. And this metabolism is still expanding and exploding. And this is why I would defend the second great acceleration under conditions of the experience of many people of deceleration. I think it's a good wordplay. The second is Bela's point on the imperial mode of living and the poor people. Our point is the imperial mode of living, we use it in a singular, not in a plural, is a structural category. It's to understand a societal structure we are all have to live in. And of course, then there are huge inequalities. And we name it in the book, and in the new book even more. But I would say even people in Saxony live the imperial mode of living, but the people in Saxony, there are a lot of wealth in Saxony as well. But of course, people who are struggling in the everyday life, when they use public transport, when they have their cars, etc. This is a part of the imperial mode of living. It's not that we want to blame poor people, that we want to blame the workers. Of course, we live in a class society, in a patriarchal society, but I think our opener for the thinking is to look at this structural thing. Pierre Bourdieu, I don't want to compare myself with Pierre Bourdieu, he said the praxis, it's a concept. It's, of course, there are many, many practices, but the praxis is a concept to understand the world, yeah, in this sense. And when it comes to alternatives, and Sarah asked for a focus. I don't have one focus. There is not one message, but Maria, and also thank you for all this technical support. When we had before a conversation, he mentioned a term we really like. I didn't have the time today to develop it, maybe another occasion. We finished the new book with a concept which we call the transformative cells. And we argue that we should look much more carefully into our organizations, institutions, and practices where people are who want more, who want a green transition, a social ecological transformation. In schools, at the university, in the research institutes, that also the trade unions are highly heterogeneous. So where are the people who really want to go beyond the representation of people, better working conditions, important enough? And this is a bit idea of the transformative cells we develop on 6 pages, but it gets quite an interesting feedback, and maybe on another occasion I can develop it. To finish, I think also, where's the focus, Sarah? One major challenge of the trade unions and of the workers' movement, if you like, in a broader sense, is, beside all what Bettina presented, to counter the authoritarian design. There is a strong, and this I live also in Thüringen. Yeah, I voted in Thüringen because my partner lives there. This is so strong. And it's not only a question of education, it's also a question of education. It's a question of a dispositif. It's a question, also in the Foucauldian sense, a question of an attractive orientation, which is authoritarian, which is the authoritarian desire. And I think we have to, there's so many studies, we have to think, what does it mean? And what I really liked in the summer of migration in 2015, what the trade unions in Germany and Austria did against this also around the corner emerging racism and of course the interpretation of the far right, is what we call in German Kante zeigen. To really show it's not possible at the workplace with the colleagues that you here speak in a racist way. And this is kind of to counter this authoritarian desire. I don't have a clear-cut kind of meta plan, yeah, a master plan, but I think this is a terrain we should work on with our means as scientists, here with ETUI, etc., but also in our, let's say, in our social activities, yeah, to counter this desire. Thanks for the attention.
Yes, thank you very much for coming, for this very fruitful, insightful, and interesting discussion, for the question, for being here. And I'm looking forward to continuing our debate in this or other formats. Thank you.